This is going to be a very interesting and fascinating session for me, and I hope for all of you. It's an honor for me to be talking with Sudha, whom we consider, or at least I consider, to be a Punekar, because you have spent so many years in Pune. मी असं म्हणतो की एकदा पुण्यात राहिलेलं असलं ना की तुम्ही कायमचे पुणेकर होता. त्यामुळे मी तुम्हाला एखादा मराठीत पण प्रश्न विचारता चालेल ना. And of course, very happy to be with my dear friend Vikram, who's produced so many amazing books, including the 2 volumes on Savarkar, and of course his latest book that we are going to talk about today. And he's also planning to write many more interesting books. So time permitting, we'll talk about some of his next books as well. So there's a lot to cover. I'll ask questions for about 35-40 minutes, and then we will have about 20 minutes for audience questions. Let me start by first asking Sudha about you're familiar with Vikram and Vikram's writings. What do you think of his latest book? And a related question to that is, what do you think? You yourself mentioned you're interested in history. What do you think of the state of history, the way it's taught in our schools today? And what needs to, if anything, change there?
Thank you, Mr. Paranjape. Coming from a history lover's family, actually the way we teach our children history is totally wrong according to me. What do we teach? Shivaji was born 1630, died in 1680. Aurangzeb died in 1707. 1715, War of Plasse. 1857, the War of Independence, with a date and event. Second part, when we talk about history, we teach only history of North India. Okay? Delhi Sultans, Mughals, and then their details in the Mughals. We don't even talk about other part of India at that time. For example, the Cholas of South, the Vijayanagara Rayaru of the Vijayanagara Empire, which was half the India in those days, or Raja Ranjit Singh, who went up to Afghanistan, or Maratha kingdom. And that's the reason, Marathas were great warriors, and that's the reason even in modern, in New India or after independence India, you have a Maratha regiment. Tell me why you have Maratha regiment? Because it is in your DNA. Okay, it's in your DNA. Marathas were great warriors. So we teach history, somehow finish it. We never make parts of it which teaches us what faults we should not make. Who are the great people, unsung heroes, and who sacrificed their lives. And because of them, we are in independent India today. None of them we do. And that's the reason I like Vikram's latest book, Bravehearts of Bharat. These are the 15 characters, excellent characters. Some of them, some people like me who are nothing else, so we always into that work, so we may know. But all characters, hardly anyone knows. Okay? I was discussing with Vikram before this book release, that how many I knew and how many he knew, and of course I had always this problem, how many women are there, how many men are there, and all those things. Okay? So I consider that teaching history method is wrong. We only give the dates. We never tell the economic situation. We never tell the entire history of India. And I feel it really should change, because India does not mean only North India. India means Kashmir to Kanyakumari. How many of us know Kashmir history? We don't even know. So I feel that's the reason this book has a lot of importance in today's scenario. I was telling Vikram one more thing. There are 3 good historians in modern era: Vikram Sampath, Manu Pillai, and Sanjeev Sanyal. All 3 are 3 gems, I call them. in Vikram's case, he was a year senior to my son, so I know him from his half-study days. Okay? And he does lot of research. He doesn't come out just like that because hearsay stories. He does good research. We require more historians like Vikram Sampath or Manu Pillai or Sanjeev Sanyal kind. There may be many, but my knowledge is limited. Okay.
No, I think that's an excellent point, and I agree with you on the historians as well. Vikram, there's a lot to talk about this book, but I won't start, and as we discussed, getting into this book before we have a brief discussion about your earlier books, which are extremely famous, especially here in Pune, but I guess all over India and all around the world, about the 2 volumes that you written, the magnum opus. I mean, the second volume is even bigger. I don't know how many of you have actually read cover to cover both volumes. If you haven't, you should definitely. How's the reception been to that book? I think we have had some interesting dialogues that you have with some famous politicians on TV about it as well. Leave that aside, but from the common readers, from the common people, how has the reception for these previous 2 books been?
Thank you, Amit, and it's good afternoon to everyone. It's really a very, very special occasion for me to be in my very favorite city, Pune. I keep saying this often that I receive more love here than my own hometown, Bangalore, and I think that's thanks to the Savarkar book. And
Your mother is from Pune.
Maharashtra. My mother, yeah, I'm an honorary citizen of Maharashtra, given my mother was a Maharashtrian. And it's extremely special that Sudha auntie has, launched the book again for me. I consciously call her auntie because, as she said, her son Rohan and I were in the same school in Bangalore, Bishop Cottons. There's one thing that I must tell about her. Of course, everyone knows about the kind of book she writes, but the amount of reading that she does, particularly of history, would put even a historian to shame. The discussions we've had at her house over dinner on matters of history, the knowledge and the childlike curiosity to know more, I think that's one quality that all of us need to imbibe from her, and I'm very grateful that once again, this is the second time she's launching my book, the first being in Bangalore, so I'm very fortunate and blessed, auntie. Amit, to your question, I think, when I started researching and writing about that book, my mother was still around, and she had warned me that she was very scared for my well-being, even when my first book on Mysore came up, and there was a talk that I was giving which had something to do with Tipu Sultan. There were protests, there were threats. My effigy was burnt in the middle of Bangalore in MG Road for an article that I wrote and so on. So she had actually taken a vow from me that you're never going to talk about Tipu Sultan anywhere in Bangalore. Of course, now that she's not there, I have broken that vow and actually going to write a full-length biography of his, and I hope from wherever she'll be protecting me. But even on Savarkar, and being a Maharashtrian herself, she knew the kind of passions that it would invoke. So she'd all the time kept telling me that, better be careful, don't prod into difficult waters. But the kind of reception that the books got, collectively between the 2 volumes, I think they've sold a little over 1 lakh copies, which I never expected that it would sell so much. It's a thick book, 700, 800 pages, and with so much of references and endnotes and all of that. But then a lot of people have been reading it. It's been translated into Marathi, Hindi, and several languages. And today, in airports, in public places, people come and recognize me, take photographs, autographs. I think thanks to that book. One book can change, the course of your life. My earlier book on Goharjan changed my life completely. It gave me the courage to get out of my corporate job and take up writing full time. Savarkar, I think, took me to a different level, which I didn't expect. And I think that's truly my mother sitting up there and showering her blessings.
Indeed, and I think your upcoming books on Tipu Sultan, and you had mentioned that you're also going to work on one on Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj after that. Yeah. I think that
then book, I will surely get a
that book. I think we won't wait for that. You're already a Punekar as far as we are concerned.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So your background is very interesting. You were an engineer, or you are an engineer. Then you studied management. Then your corporate job. How did you become a historian?
Because right from childhood, being a single child and also being a very shy, introverted person since then and even now, I think I made very few friends. And the 2 friends that my parents introduced me were, one was classical music and the other was history. And reading books right from a very young age. And as Sudhaji mentioned to the young person previously, if you need to write more, you need to read more. And I think reading a lot of historians across the board, different ideological spectrums and so on from a very young age, oriented me all the time towards the discipline. And so even while I was in my corporate job, my first 3 books I wrote balancing it with a day job and doing research over, after coming back from work or over weekends, taking, paid leaves, all of that. And then that's how that happened. And once the book started doing well, it was very easy to leave that job and then plunge into this. And very coincidentally, I got an offer to do a PhD in history from the University of Queensland in Australia. And so that kind of completely changed, because in this country, I think you may write as many books on a subject, but people will still ask you, but what is your pedigree? What is your locus to write this? You don't have a degree in this.
And people were still asking you this question.
Well, that they do. So now I can also flash that paper and say, yeah, I also have this with me. But then the degree apart, I think my interest for the subject had always been there since childhood. And I feel very blessed and grateful and fortunate that very few people, I think, in this world get the opportunity to pursue their passion. Where your passion becomes your livelihood, it doesn't seem like a job, it doesn't seem like a chore. And so today, being a full-time writer, full-time historian, dedicated to the discipline, dedicated to archiving that I do on the side, as I said, I can only be grateful.
I think thankfully we have a great historian here and not an engineer. We have a lot of engineers, but not many historians. So I think
all engineers
you made a great switch.
I think all engineers keep defaulting from the discipline.
Actually, all 3 of us are engineers.
Well, yeah.
Originally. Let me ask you the same question that I asked Sudhaji, but in a slightly different way. We've talked a lot about what the status of history is in India particularly, how it is viewed, how it is studied, how is it chronicled, how it's presented from a certain point of view or was presented in a certain point of view, how it can set a narrative, how it was used to set a narrative. So there's a lot of discussion about this all over the place. And this book is partially an output of that discussion, because there are historical figures, as Sudhatai also mentioned, history is a lot more than just the Mughals. What would be your view on this aspect?
Well, the history of India as we've read today, I think the chronicled version in English, at least, I don't know how many of you would know of James Mill and the history of British India, in which he completely debunked India, her traditions, her customs, and somehow that colonial hand-down that we've got from our colonial masters as to always looking at our past with a sense of being apologetic about it, being self-loathing, talking all the time about shortcomings. Rather, every society has its faults. Every society goes through ups and downs. But focusing only on the failures, only on the shortcomings, and not on genuine reasons to be proud of ourselves, of our civilization, of our ancestors, their achievements, that somehow it has continued even after independence, sadly. And that is largely because of the ideological stranglehold that historiography in India has been kept under, and it is the Marxist historiography which has been the most dominant one in India, which has stifled all forms of discussion, dissent, difference of opinion, debate, which is so important in a subject like history. Often I compare history to that poem that we read as children of the blind man and the elephant. There's an elephant in a room, and all the blind men are asked to say, how do you describe the elephant? And they touch different parts of the elephant. Someone says the elephant looks like the trunk, someone says it looks like the tail, someone says it's like the body. They are all correct and they're all wrong as well, because the elephant is ultimately the sum of the parts of all that they say. So history writing is, I think, in my view, very similar. We are all blind men grappling with whatever little information is available, and to reconstruct a past that has already happened and which we don't know much about. So different versions or alternative versions of historiography needs to be encouraged, which unfortunately in this country was always stifled. And today there is a resurgence of that, an alternative narrative to what the main history is, where we are talking about genuine pride and not jingoism. So, I mean, some of the young children who are there in the room, in their history books, I think they would know by memory all the wars and battles that India lost or Indians lost, right from that myths called the Aryan invasion theory to the Hunas, the Shakas, the Scythians, whoever came, Kushanas, and the Arab invasion of Sindh. You have the Battle of Tarain, Battle of Plassey, Battle of Buxar. You would know all of those by heart. Panipat wars, Anglo-Mysore war, Anglo-Maratha war, Anglo-Sikh war. But today, if we are around as a civilization and we have not evaporated from the face of the earth, there must have been some wars we won also. There must have been some courage that we displayed also as a civilization. So where then are those stories? Where then are those stories of valor? Can we name 10 wars that we as India and Indians won? If so, what were these wars? Who were the protagonists? What was their story? What were their challenges? Why is it that these things never feature in our history books? And as Sudhaji rightly mentioned, the south of India is hardly covered in the larger narrative. The northeast of India is a black hole. I mean, how many of us even know about the Ahoms of Assam who ruled for 600 years? Today, of course, the government of India and the government of Assam is celebrating the 400th birth anniversary of Lachit Barphukan, who is also featured in this book. And I was recently in Delhi. It was celebrated last week where I spoke there. And right from the airport to street corners to bus stops, there were big hoardings of Lachit Borphukan. I think Delhi mein agar shor machana hai to halla bolna hai. You have to come and really attack in the middle, and only then people take attention. But even 5 years ago, did anybody know who Lachit Borphukan was? Did anyone of our young children know about him? So I think there are lots of lopsided defects in our history, and the place of women. Women don't get the correct representation in our books, and so this book
has
7 women.
Half 7 out of 15 are women.
So yeah, so all these different lopsided shortcomings that we have in our historiography, it's a small attempt to rectify that. A lot of people have said, but why have you left this one, X or Y or Z? I mean, the selection of characters, it was more about whom to leave rather than whom to choose, because there are so many unsung heroes, hundreds and thousands of them. So I think I hope that this spurs lot more scholars, lot more historians to start writing. And in fact, I was telling Sudhaji in the morning too and earlier that for children, she should also write from the mythology. She should probably move to history and write these stories which will reach out maybe much more than what an academic book would.
I think it will be great if Sudhaji also writes about this, and maybe also a request to you, Sudhaji. You should also. There are two schools of thought. One school of thought in history says that history should be written with all facts, with all data, all references, like what Vikram has done. And I like that school of thought, but there is another school of thought that comes from many of my own friends who say that can get too boring for 90% of the people. 10% of people like you like that kind of history, but 90% of the people like some fiction element in it. So history, but with some fiction around it. I don't know, what's your view on making history interesting?
There are again two views for this. One is, Vikram is very popular in Pune. I call him a NRM, non-resident Maharashtrian, and in Karnataka. Okay.
Both of you.
Okay. That's true. Like, I like pure history, like Vikram. I like pure history. Whatever may be our defect, I should know, and no exaggeration. But if you do that, on a TV serial, nobody will see. Forget about writing in a book. You make a TV serial. So I don't see historical TV serial, because I tell my sister is great follower of historical TV serial. Now I think Ahilyabai is coming. She says, Ahilyabai, I said, Sunanda, it is not like this. The fact is this. She said, you keep your facts. Yeah, I have to see how there is the politics with the women and all. I said, she's not cooking. I said, she was a Maharani, there is no cooking. She had a lot more other difficulties. But for a common man, You should make a combination of, I definitely feel if you tell the facts, people don't read. But there is always a way to present it. See, my grandfather was a school teacher and history. He will tell me history in such a way that as if you are participated in that. I told to Vikram that in Bangalore, the Vijayanagar Empire was lost in 1565 in the war of Talikota because the king or the emperor of Vijayanagar was Ramaraya. And they fought the war. He was 85 or 90 years old. He died. And it happened. And my grandfather took us to Talikote only. So the war, there was no war, it's a sleepy, dumb village. He said, here were the sultans, here was the Vijayanagar, here they fought. He made it as if it is happening in front of your eyes. And we all cried when he died, in the war. Then I decided I will never marry a man whose name is Ram. Because the person whose name is Ram is going to destroy the family of the father-in-law. Okay? And I may be 10 years old. So what I want to tell you is, the way you teach is important. The facts remains the same, but there is always a way to teach. And you don't fictionalize it, because once you fictionalize that, the authenticity goes. And it should be there, but it should be told in the context of why it happened. Like Somnath was destroyed many times, but there was a Chalukya king by the name Bhima, who really went out of the way. He did so much work. We never talk, but you should tell in a war, somebody will win, somebody will lose. The way you put it, the way you write is very important, and that we don't do. I still believe, like Vikram, truth should be told to children, but the way you tell, make it softening, I believe, than fiction. I don't believe in fiction. Fiction, you can write anything, but softening it, putting in a different way, convincing way, and telling the facts makes more readable, I feel.
Thanks. I think that summarizes it very well. Yeah. So before we do a deep dive into this book, I'm going to read a quote in the first section of this book. How many names in this list of 15 Bharat Bravehearts ring a bell? Contrary to perceptions, history is rarely objective. Such is the retelling of Bharat's history and the lens used that few of these names you'll recognize. The names, the 15 characters covered in the book. Right? Vikram Sampath has done a great service by correcting a biased narrative that has colored perceptions of Bharat's history. This is a quote by Dr. Bibek Debroy, a good friend of both of ours. Is advisor to the Prime Minister on economic issues and a historian himself. I think this quote, I thought, summarized some of the key things that you were trying to get out in this book. So one obvious question about the book that you have answered so many times, including yesterday, but I have to ask you, how did you pick the 15 that you have picked for this, and when is volume 2 coming out?
Well, to be honest, my publishers, Penguin, they conned me into writing this. They kept saying, after those 2 heavy volumes, let this be a quickie. Quickly you can write a book with 15 people. It'll be simple and maybe it'll sell more and whatever. And so I said, okay, let me take a break from so much of heavy duty biography, because I have Tipu Sultan and Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj coming up. So I thought this will be a break. But honestly, it turned out to be 15 times more difficult, because though the expanse was, in terms of length of the chapters, it may not have.
Research was 15 times.
Yeah, to travel to all those places, to read a lot of regional literature, which I had to get translated, and also listen to oral narratives, folklore, and all of that to reconstruct, because so little is known about many of them. Let's just ask the young people there. How many do you know Lalitaditya Muktapida of Kashmir?
School girls.
School children there. We'll ask only the school children, whoever is from the schools.
Nothing wrong in this.
Yeah, it's okay. That's fine. Lalitaditya, no. Rani Nike Devi of Gujarat. No.
All of them know Nike shoes. Rani
Okay,
Rani Abbakka from Karnataka. Our school children. So
how about Kanoji Angre?
Your own Maharashtra, Karnataka.
Okay, at least a few.
okay.
Hirakani, Hirakani, because they have seen the movie. Okay. And the serial both.
So, I mean, I think point is made that a lot of these people, Lalitaditya Muktapida of the Karkota dynasty of Kashmir, the book starts with him. So it is in the 7th century CE. And he was known as the second Alexander, the second Samudragupta of India, someone who ensured that the Kashmir empire was beyond that little state that we see today. It almost spanned almost the whole of North India, the Indo-Gangetic plains, Bihar, Magadha and Bengal, Odisha, even going up to Pragjotishpura or Assam, and the Madhya Desha, all of Madhya Pradesh and so on, and the western side, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and extending all the way to Afghanistan, Pakistan today, and Gilgit-Baltistan, parts of Tibet. That was the expanse of the Kashmir empire. And most importantly, he was such a bulwark against the Arabs who kept invading India repeatedly. And beyond a narrow strip of Sindh that the Arabs managed to occupy in 712 when Muhammad bin Qasim comes. I'm sure all of you would have heard of Muhammad bin Qasim and the Arab invasion of Sindh. But who were the people who kept him beyond that Sindh? That would not have been told to you. And that was people like Lalitaditya, people like Yashovarman of his times. There was Jayabhatta, there was Bappa Raval, there was Vikramaditya II, a Chalukya ruler, there was Danti Durga, a Rashtrakuta ruler. All these people formed alliances and pushed the Arabs away and ensured that they never occupied India. The Arabs never could occupy India.
It took them 500
years to establish an Islamic Sultanate in India, while most of Central Asia had collapsed to the might of the Caliph's sword. So what was this resistance that was going on for 500 years? And who were the people there? Lalitaditya was one, and he also established Kashmir as a important center of learning. Because the Digvijaya campaigns that Indian rulers went on, it was not only about expansion and building magnificent palaces and all that, but also making your kingdom an excellent center of learning and scholarship. Similarly, Rani Naiki Devi, whom I asked about, and not the Nike shoes, but she was a Chalukya ruler of Gujarat who defeated Muhammad Ghori in 1178. We all have heard of Muhammad Ghori.
We never heard about her.
We never heard of a lady ruler who in Gujarat as the regent of an infant child managed to defeat Muhammad Ghori in the battle of Kasarhada in 1178. Never told to us. Similarly, Rani Abbakka that I spoke of from Karnataka in Ullal, a small little principality, she managed to give a death blow to the Portuguese. The Portuguese were thrown out and there were 4 Abbakka Ranis there, and all of them kept having this resistance against the Portuguese. So much so that, and using very local, indigenous techniques, coconuts were plenty available in coastal regions, right? So they would take the coconut, carve it out, and then in that put ammunition and gunpowder and hurl this in the middle of the night on the Portuguese fleet. And 200 of these Portuguese, ships caught fire and they were all, annihilated. Similarly, Kanhoji, of course, we will talk about, but in Kerala, you had this man called Martandavarma, have you heard of the Battle of Kolachal? Has it ever been mentioned to the children there? No.
There is no South Indian history.
Yeah. So Martandavarma had this small little thing, kingdom called Venadu, which later expanded to what became Travancore. And in 1741 was this Battle of Kolachal, which ensured that the Dutch East India Company, which by then had a very significant influence, their sphere of access was from South Africa going all the way through Asia, large parts of India, and also Southeast Asia, Japan, Maldives. They were the first company to be listed on a global stock exchange. That was their power. And this little kingdom, which was hardly, of any significance, managed to defeat the Dutch so convincingly that they collapsed, even as a global power, and their dreams of colonizing India were completely gone. And that's why we didn't have the Dutch colonizing us like the French or the British did. In any other country, tell me, Battle of Kolachal would be known to every young person here. Martandavarma statues would probably be there in every street corner and we would be celebrating him. But in our country, maybe in Kerala, some people know about it, even there it's doubtful, but rest of India would not have heard of him. Similarly, you go to Assam. Now the Ahom rulers, who I said, ruled for 600 long years, and Assam had remained invincible and unconquerable for any invader. In the entire history, barring small spans of time, it was never occupied by anyone. Bakhtiyar Khilji, who had managed to go and completely destroy Nalanda and Vikramshila and occupy Bengal, and then moved to Assam, Kamrupa as it was called. The manner in which he was beaten black and blue and sent back by the ruler there, he had come with 12,000 horsemen. Now they did this scorched earth policy where on the route you destroy all the vegetation, irrigation. So they had to literally kill their own horses and eat them to survive. And then this guy goes and hides in a temple, and suddenly he sees the Assamese are building a stockade all around him, and that shocks him more, and he flees for his life to Bengal. Out of 12,000, only some 200 people are left. And the Assamese king who actually did this was this man called King Prithu. Nobody in this country would know who Prithu was. So, and later on in 1671, you had the Battle of Saraighat, where Lachit Borphukon ensures that a mighty, very, very mighty army of Aurangzeb under Raja Ram Singh, one of the largest imperial armies in India, comes to Assam. And this is a small little group of, peasants and farmers, fishermen. They use local timber that is there in Assam, build boats, build up their naval fleet. And this is a classic case of the underdog winning. And in any B school, maybe it should be taught as a case study as to how, though you are numerically, inferior, militarily inferior, you can still inflict one of the worst defeats, which Lachit Borphukon did, and pushed Aurangzeb's army outside, so much so that Assam could never be occupied. But again, as I said, his name doesn't ring a bell, nor does the Battle of Saraighat ring a bell in anyone's minds. And that, I think, is the bane of how Indian history has been fed down to us over the generations.
Yeah, and I think as we said, I mean, this is my personal feeling that Delhi-centric history talks about many of these, some of them were invaders, some of them came later, where it's very Delhi-centric and you only learn about those names. Many of these people should be celebrated as Delhi names of roads or as statues, and we hardly hear about them anywhere else.
Delhi has an Aurangzeb lane, a Tughlaq, Lodi Garden, a Tughlaq lane, not even one road on Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj.
And we don't hear about any of these anywhere. I mean, even I probably knew half of these names. I won't say I knew the history, but the names. I think we are going to have we will have about 10-15 minutes for questions. Let me ask you one key question, Vikram, since we are right here in Pune. There are three characters around Maharashtra, Pune that Vikram has covered.
The maximum comes from Maharashtra.
Maximum
actually.
from this area. So, and these are Chand Bibi, Kanhoji Angre, and Ahilya Bai Holkar. We'll take great Maharashtra influence, Maharashtra area, whatever you want to call it. So Vikram, can you briefly talk about these three? I know it's people should read your book, but if you can give us some sneak preview of these three chapters.
Yeah. So Kanhoji Angre, of course, was the Sarkhel, the military naval commander of the Maratha navy, and the Marathas, unlike the Cholas who went on the high seas, went and occupied, like the Cholas in 1025 CE, Rajendra Chola went and occupied parts of Sri Vijaya and the Malay Peninsula, Sri Lanka, Maldives and all these places. The Marathas never went on the high seas, but they acted as coast guards. I think Shivaji Maharaj was the founder of Indian Navy, so to say, and so established all these coastal forts, all dotting around the Konkan, Mumbai, that entire region, Kolaba. And during the time of Sambhaji and later, of course, Shahu, was when Kanhoji comes in, and he is somebody who ensures that the Maratha Navy's supremacy is built on the Arabian seas, and keeps all these people at bay. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the English East India Company. He has a long fight with the English East India Company and the Siddhis.
And they called him a pirate.
They called him a pirate. There's lots of
references on who writes the history.
Yeah, my freedom fighter is your terrorist. So there's lots of references of Kanhoji Angria, as he's called in the British records, as a sea pirate. But he was doing, he was in Marathi records, it would be the other way around, where he was issuing dastaks or passports to all these people, saying if you want to trade here, you better do it on our terms and our conditions, and you're not going to do anything beyond just trade. You can't come and colonize and occupy the place. Chand Bibi is again a very interesting character from Ahmednagar, but then she married into the Sultanate of Bijapur, and she was almost like moving between these two sultanates, and there was so much of strife, so much of internal rebellion, and it's a horrible history of deceit, father killing son, son killing brother, everybody killing everyone, and it's a terrible history of the Deccan Sultanates, and that is when this lady comes up to defend almost both these, her Sasural and also her Maika. And when Akbar by then has started going southwards, he sees that these are low-hanging fruits which we can take up, but somehow he is unable to capture. He sends his sons Murad and all of them to come and occupy, but they are unable to capture Ahmednagar. And finally, Akbar himself has to come all the way to occupy this place, and she is killed in the battle. Ahilyabai Holkar, of course, I think is very popular among people, but I included her here because though she was not in the conventional sense a warrior who wore, an armor and rushed into the battlefield, I think she was a civilizational hero. At a time when probably the civilization, the faith, our spiritual, value of the country was on the decadence, she ensured that she, like what Adi Shankaracharya had done several centuries ago, she kind of reunified the whole country culturally and spiritually, and she thought of it very wonderfully. What were the important sites which are important in the Hindu psyche? And today there's Places of Worship Act and all, we're debating all this. Should we go and reclaim everything? What is to be? All these debates come up. She had an answer because she renovated all the 12 Jyotirlingas, the Char Dhams, the 7 Puris as mentioned in the Garuda Puran. And from Kashmir to Rameshwaram, from Dwarka to Kamrupa, she unified the country culturally and spiritually. Water from the Ganga was brought to South Indian temples everywhere so that this north-south divide could go away. Scholars from across, met. So I think that is one important at a time when the country was crumbling and at the verge of British colonialism. Here was a lady who managed to do that, and I thought that is why she deserved the importance. And it's great that all these three very diverse characters come from the state of Maharashtra, which has produced some of the greatest heroes of our history.
Thanks, thanks Vikram. Before we go to audience questions, and we're going to have 10 to 15 minutes for audience questions, I'm going to ask one last question to Sudha. As we have been saying all along that we need a second volume and a third volume of this book because there are just so many heroes and heroines of Indian history that we don't talk about, we don't learn about. Vikram is here. Which ones would you like Vikram to include?
Oh, I made a list actually. Last time I told Vikram, when you go for second volume, you should talk to me. I have told him. There are many people actually. I was talking about the Rayas of the Vijayanagar, maybe Praudadeva Raya. Okay, Krishnadeva Raya is well known in South, but at least Praudadeva Raya, some Pandyan kings I want. And Samudragupta. I told you I never talked about Samudragupta at the time of Kalidasa or Raja Bhoja. People do not know about it. And many more people actually I felt. I have made a list actually, it's at home. But I am going to talk to him before he writes second volume. Give my own applications, let's see how he can. But he said you can give many applications, but we should have a research paper, information that only on hearsay stories or the folklore he can't write. Okay, he has to have some papers, and most papers are in England. Okay, so poor chap has to go to England
but he is an amazing researcher, so he'll find it from wherever he needs.
And when he gives, I will go through sentence by sentence. Even in the books I went sentence by sentence, and I told him because it's such a joy to read. The first thing when he gave this book out, I checked how many I know. I knew 14, I did not know one. That is the Manipur I did not know. Otherwise I knew all 14. Okay? I felt ashamed. How come I have not studied Eastern India. I said, okay, before he read second volume, let me read that. But we are going to, Vikram is going to do a thorough research and good characters and with authenticity. So you require some proof, and then you will write that. But you
No,
know,
but
it,
I'm
you have any
very happy to
character?
know that you're also submitting a list, because I'm also going to submit
Yeah,
a list, and so will many people. It's a long one. Of course, I'm going to be biased
More.
about Maharashtra and Marathas, and I mean, we hear about obviously we hear about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, we hear about Bajirao and some of the other Peshwas, and we hear about some of the losses, but there are a lot of next level generals in all of 18th century which played very important roles in expanding the Maratha Empire all over India that we never talk about. So there's a long list of those.
but what has
that are
happened
also
in
there.
Maharashtra, all of them you have converted into movies with all fictional character. Ramchand, what is Rama Shastri Prabhune onwards. Rama Shastri.
First one done by Prabhat in 1930s.
Yeah, I have seen that movie. Rama Shastri Prabhune. Then you have
Netaji
Baba.
Palkar.
Yeah, Netaji Palkar. Then Deshpande, who is this?
Baji Prabhu.
Baji Prabhu. Then Hirakani. Then you have made Bajirao Mastani. Everyone knows that. If you ask Bajirao Mastani, everybody thinks of Ranveer Singh and Deepika Padukone. Then actually I had an objection for that. Kashibai later adopts that child, calls him Krishnaji, and she brings up, and they are not shown in the movie. So you have a lot of characters, but they all come in the movie form. So there are many characters.
So I think we will switch to audience questions. I don't know how much time we have. We have 10 minutes. Yeah. So again, we will have mics. I think a simple request: keep the question as short as possible. No feedback for Vikram. Just directly ask your question. That way, we will cover more questions. So who has the mic right now? Yeah, we'll start with that.
Sir,
Or you can take this one, so that one is enough for
sir, am I audible too?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get the mics here as well, please. Yeah. Quick.
Yeah. First of all, good afternoon to all, and all the best to Vikram sir for his new book. So, as a student of history, I know that history is contextual, and there has been a debate on the politicization of history right now in India. So, as you rightly pointed out, that India in history lacks inclusivity. The episode of Lachit Borphukan and Kanu Jangre.
Yeah.
But my question is it the right time to rewrite the history, especially in schools and colleges, and to get rid of the ideological history that we have been reading?
Yeah, I fully agree, but then, one ideology should not be replaced by one more ideology. I think it's time for the true history of India. Because if that happens and then history becomes this political football, today there is one government, tomorrow there will be one more, nobody is going to rule forever, then the books keep changing and the children will keep getting confused every few years. In fact, the Chinmaya mission in Chennai, they had actually written different history books for classes 6, 7 and 8. And I was there at the launch of that book in Chennai, and I was asking Swami Mitrananda, who had initiated this whole thing. They said, okay, we have actually presented it the way it is, but 9th and 10th, since they have to appear for the board exam, they will have to switch back to the NCRT book. So I was wondering, I asked him also that 6, 7 and 8 class, the person is going to read that Aurangzeb, the true history of what he was a despot, he was a bigot, and he destroyed all this. 9th and 10th, he suddenly becomes secular. He protected more temples than he destroyed, as some crazy nuts tell us.
Yeah.
So then, what happens to that poor child? I was worried about that. So I think, governments and policy makers and educators need to, you can't treat history so flippantly. I think history gives us a sense of who we are as a nation, as a civilization, as a people, our identity. It's far too important to be left to ideologies and political parties and all these people to, do what they have done to us in the last 70 years. At least now, I hope and pray that the people, all of you need to lobby and, fight hard and petition the governments, the powers that be, that the truth needs to be told so that our children will be reading the right history of India.
Very, very well said, Vikram. Okay, question here, and then behind that, after that.
Good afternoon, everyone. My question is, we as a country have different names based on culture and geography, like India, Bharat, Hindustan. What should be one common and the correct name which we should carry forward?
Should I ask the question to Sai Deepak?
I know. You want to answer this?
Actually, the name depends upon who has given. Like, what is your name? Okay. Why did you get that name? Because your parents gave that name. Similarly, people from the west, they call on the river Indus. That is Sindhu. Sindhu became Indus, so it became India. Or Hindu. Sindhu became Hindu. Because in Iran, I think they don't and have a problem, I suppose. So they called Hindu. Al-Hindu. Then it became Hindustan. Okay. Hindustan means the area of Hindu people. Bharat is Jambudvipe, Bharatakande, Bharatavarsha, our ancestors go on telling you in Punyavachana, that is how it is called. The land between Sindhu and Brahmaputra, Himalayas and Hindu Mahasagar, that's the Indian Ocean, what we call today. This is called India. The names go on changing depending on who gives. For example, if you read history, before 8th century, Bay of Bengal was called Purva Samudra. Okay? And Arabian Sea was called Paschima Samudra. If you go further down, Bay of Bengal was called Ganga Samudra. And Arabian Sea was called Sindhu Samudra. So now which is right now? Which is wrong? Now Bharat we say because traditionally it was Bharatavarsha because of the King Bharata. So it depends on who calls it what emotions. So one name, you may give a name today, but tomorrow somebody like he says it should not become a football. So this is what I feel who gives. But for all practical purpose, I still feel Bharata Desha or Bharata is I feel the right way. This is my personal opinion. Vikram can add little more.
Anaga?
I think we've always had India, that is Bharat, as our constitution has said, and also Sai Deepak's book. But I think it's in India, I don't think they can anything can be unitary. We don't believe in one book, one God, one this. So I think the multiplicity, it's okay. Your name may be Ganesh, but your nickname may be something else. Someone else may call you by something else out of love. So I think all these names are, I think, equally important. But what was important was, in the British era, there was this man called John Strachey, who was in charge of training the Imperial Civil Service. And he used to infamously say that the one thing to know about India is that there never was and there never is something called India. And so that thing, the other extreme is the dangerous part, that many educated people also, we think that, the British gave us a sense of nation. They made us one, unified us. Otherwise, before that, we were just disparate, entities all fighting with each other. Now, obviously, no country, USA was not what it was 250, 300 years ago. Europe was changing all the time, even as we speak. There's Brexit, there's so many things happening all the time there. So, political borders may be different, but civilizationally and culturally, and as Sudha auntie mentioned, the conception of what our ancestors thought, Uttaram yat samudrasya himadraschaiva dakshinam varshatad bharatam nama bharati yatra santati. The country is Bharatavarsha and its children are Bharatiyas. That was very, very clear. So I think that is more important than what you call. What's in a name? A rose would smell as sweet, as Shakespeare had said.
It's been an inspiring listen to both of you, your conversion from engineers to writers. So I would like to know, how do you cross that threshold when you feel that I have something to say which other people would love to read? And I would like to know when you crossed that threshold, especially because both of your books are slightly away from the narrative that existed at that point in time. You wrote about somebody who's been a controversial figure, and you wrote, what you want to say. Similar to you, your stories also sort of shifted from, urban setup to a slight small town setup. So I would like to hear that. Thank you.
Okay. Controversy he will do. My books are not controversial at all, because they're all children books. No, children are not controversial. Because I think so, Vikram may agree or may not agree, or even Amit may agree or may not agree. Engineering makes you very analytical. Study of engineering makes you extremely analytical. Tell the problem, we'll go logically and have the solution. That's the way we have been trained, not emotionally carried. And any problem we take, we would like to analyze it. And because we are authors, we also make it softer, more approachable, more human. If a true engineer really writes, like Narayana Murty has to write, he writes in 3 sentences. Here was the king, he came, he conquered, he died. Absolutely no emotion in that 3 sentences. And okay, whereas I and Vikram will not be able to write like that. We said, here was the king, he was generous, etc. We add and make it much more human. Because of our training, we are very accurate. We keep word count or time boundaries. Normal authors, okay, I will finish in 3 months, but they'll go on 9 months. Whereas I and Vikram will not do that. We have time bound. We say, this is a project. I have to do the research. I have to bring the results, and it should be, it should be in a certain format. So this all engineering training helps us to write actually better. This is a cross experience makes it better, like how a crossbeat is always better. Okay. What about you?
I completely agree with Sudhaji that, I think the engineering background and the analytical mind, the way of looking at it, I think the STEM background makes a hell of a difference. And if you actually look at the British historians, most of them were, who wrote about India at least, they were surveyors. They were engineers who went to do land surveys, and then they got, whether they were interested or they were told to also survey and write about the anthropology, about the tribes, about the different people, and thereby also document the history of the region with their own biases and so on. And that's what has come down to us as, Buchanan's account. So many of these people, they were all surveyors and this thing. So engineers have been some of the best historians actually, at least in the British time, as what we have seen.
British historians had something else in my mind, in their mind. They have to present that to the queen or the ruler. So they will look at the history where you get gold, where you get silver, where you have wood, where you have Hastidanta. See, part of that, their history was where you have the wealth in this country. Keeping that in mind, there, including Alexander. Okay, including Alexander Cummings. All his was reporting to the queen what is available in India so that they could take it there. So they had a hidden agenda, whereas Vikram and Sanyal and all these people, they don't have any hidden anything hidden in their mind. It is the truth and it should be known to us. So I discount a lot in British historian because it is not from their land. And all children, I want to tell you, if you do not know history, then you do not know your future. If you don't have roots, then you don't have fruits.
So we'll take one question here. I think that will be the last one, I think.
Okay. So Vikramji, you mentioned to the question earlier that the history should not replace its ideology, replacing one. So now it should not be the other.
Yeah.
So my question over here goes with that. Today, I would not agree to whatever that we studied was history at all. The falsification and the narratives, and as ma'am said, that they had crown to serve, and the historians today had their own masters to serve, which were, ruling our country. Now, the history that you are writing, okay, how soon do you see it in the textbook exactly? No changes like, 8th standard, 9th, and you mentioned one line, I caught it exactly, and you said, we need to start lobbying or at least protesting, okay? But we do have our jobs. I just want to quote what Anand Ranganathan said in his last speech, that, we have our jobs and that's what we vote for, so that the government can work accordingly. So my question again, that how soon do we see it replacing the real history? And it is not the ideology. I just want, we do know the, the meaning of itihas. Okay, I
think we got the question.
Yeah. Well, it's an excellent question, but addressed to the completely wrong person, because, we've had HRD ministers.
The sir is saying also, supplementing my question, what should be the time frame that we need to wait for?
I agree, sir. I share your anguish.
I think you're preaching to the choir, but I think
no, we want him to.
No, I'm sure you have jobs, but I think responsible citizenry is not just going and voting once in 5 years. No, democracy is something that needs you to be in constant vigilance, and online campaigns, on whatever those websites are, where you have this, 1 crore signature campaigns and things that you do. Yeah, in courts one can put PIL saying we want our true history to be taught. Unless you put that, unless citizen power comes, governments have many. I'm sure there's no maliciously someone is trying to ensure that we should not change or anything. The priorities of government are different. There are so many things that the government of India perhaps has to look, and history textbook is probably last on their priority list. So if it is top on your priority list as citizens, as parents, as children, you need to reach out to, and not just saying once in 5 years I will vote, we have a job to do. Of course we would have, but then start talking about it. Social media is the great this thing. Please tag the Prime Minister, the HRD Minister, whoever else needs to be tagged, and tell them that this is something that we feel very strongly about. And if people's voices reach them, the politician will listen. And if they think this is not important to anybody, they will not listen. That is as simple as that, because their mind is occupied with 100 other things. So how quickly it will be done, what is the time frame? As I said, it's an excellent question. I'm waiting for the last 8-9 years myself, but and I wish I had the answer. But it has to become a national movement, a people's movement, saying we are fed up of this left, right, all these kind of fights. Please let us know our history, the truth of our own past, the truth of our ancestors, the truth of our achievements as a civilization, as a nation, as a people, and we want that to go to our next generation, to our children. If that is the idea that is presented in a very vociferous manner to whichever government, I think they will have to sit up and listen.
I think that's a great point to close on, since we are already 2 minutes past. Vikram and Sudha will be at the book signing desk outside, or I guess wherever it is. So you can meet them there. I'm just going to end with 2 key takeaways. One is there's a lot of history that we don't know that we need to read about, and this is a great book to start that with. And secondly, and this is a slightly selfish view given the 3 people here on the desk, STEM education is actually not bad for history. Thank you.